I was asked last month on a Twitch stream how to make oozes formidable. Disgusting net of melted mozzarella. Is that even possible? Ah! Dante, I don't want to do this one. Aren't they D&D's joke monster? Actually, I feel kind of sick talking about this. What about an earwax ooze? Let's get this over with. Oh, man, sorry, I'm just gonna do this whole section again. Let's do a different one, please. No, I'm all right. I can get through. Good. My name is Ben Byrne, and this is how to make oozes formidable in a 5e campaign. Oozes are gross as fuck. Their reputation in pop culture was simultaneously created and then ruined.
He slimed me.
Are you bored with your work? Are you bored with your life? Then come on down to Ooze City and let's get sticky!
In the most famous D&D ooze monsters, the Gelatinous cube is often equated with a Roomba. It sort of cleans the dungeons of organic matter as it slides down the corridors. But the more I think about oozes and slimes and goo and all of that, the more nauseated I begin to personally feel. Oozes definitely tap into a couple of phobias that you can emphasize in your game to make them seem more terrifying. Even just the gross factor is a great place to start. Blenophobia is a fear of slime itself. Slime is repulsive, grimy, oily, thick and snotty, sinewy, mucousy, greasy, gluggy, wet and sticky, gluey, stringy and viscous. Use the most visceral and disgusting words that you can think of to describe how an ooze moves, how its stringy tendrils cling to its victims, its gluey mass engulfs them. More than just a fear of slime, emphasize an unpleasant feeling in your players' minds of touching something filthy, foul or putrid. The ooze is tinged pink by the blood of its other victims. Bits of hair, a blackened tooth, and sewerage are all stuck inside the ooze as well. Oozes that leave dungeons polished and clean feel sanitized and therefore safe. Oozes should leave behind discarded clumps of flesh and trails of smeared ichor. The fear of being dissolved, digested, and crushed, mutilated inside of an ooze is another fear to prey upon. Skin peels, bones crack, and eyeballs pop inside of an ooze. If the D&D movie had an R rating, I would love to see the party escaping from the Gelatinous cube with a layer of flesh stripped away. Instead, watch some scenes from the 1988 remake of The Blob. The movie as a whole might be a little cheesy still, but the practical effects of people getting engulfed and dissolved by the blob are horrific and gross and very 80s horror. When the character Paul is dissolved in the hospital, it actually almost looks like he could escape, he could break free. But an ooze grips and swallows its victims like suctioning mud. Escape is something that's only barely possible. Oozes therefore also prey on fears of suffocation and claustrophobia, of being cramped, smothered, unable to move or breathe as the agonizing burn of acid sets in. Use dissolving body horror, claustrophobia, and the sheer gross factor to make oozes far more terrifying in your game. But what is an ooze? What creates them? What do they want? Where do they come from? D&D lore isn't consistent on what exactly classifies an ooze. The Monster Manual suggests that they could all be scattered fragments of the Demon Lord Dweeblex, the Faceless Lord, the oozing hunger who cares little for plots or schemes and exists only to consume, to digest, and transform all living matter into more of itself. And that's cool. That gives oozes a sense of existential dread. There's something huge and grotesque growing in the sewers, and we will all become part of it eventually. In Grimhollow, an ooze is probably more likely to be related to the Aether kindred than a demon. Perhaps there is a Dweeblex counterpart in the deep void between the stars. I was watching scenes from the 2019 adaptation of Lovecraft's short story, Color Out of Space, where an indescribable ooze-like entity lands on the Earth in a meteorite. The color poisons the region's groundwater. Plants grow huge but are rotten on the inside, and folk begin to hear whispering voices from something in the well. Exposure to the color reduces some characters to desiccated husks, while others are horrifically fused together. The color twists and distorts its surroundings. Imagine if an oblex fell to the mortal realm in a meteorite. Slowly, it began replacing the local population with itself. What other effects would it cause? Does the party discover the uneaten food that's rotted in the tavern? Are domesticated animals unusually hostile? Has a babbling NPC discovered the horrible truth? Or maybe your aberrant ooze isn't trying to assimilate the locals, but transmogrify the region to match the twisted reality that it came from. Nearby trees begin to grow fleshy lesions. These wound-like cavities secrete further ooze. Victims aren't dissolved, but melted together to form horrific aberrations like gibbering mouthers. These regional effects could help make oozes seem more terrifying and more formidable, but they also leave fun clues for your party to discover and deduce the type of monster that they're facing. Has one of the characters in the group seen this sort of thing before? Oozes, of course, don't have to be tied to aberrations or aether realms or even demons, but firm monster classifications do help your D&D world feel more grounded in some sort of reality. Not every ooze needs to come from out of space, but they might be a type of monster that only occurs by eldritch or arcane means. They are innately magical. Another common explanation for oozes is that they're alchemical creations concocted by mages accidentally or intentionally for specific purposes. For example, the living toxin in Grimhollow's Monster Grimoire is a slithering poison that will hunt down its own target. Oozes do make good sentries or minions. They're similar to zombies in terms of being mindless chaff the party needn't be conflicted about destroying. But it's worth putting some thought into when you would use an ooze as a minion as opposed to any other type of monster. I think part of oozes' silly reputation is that they tend to crop up sort of randomly in dungeons. What sort of story are you trying to tell or atmosphere are you trying to build by featuring an ooze? What phobia, as we discussed earlier, are you trying to invoke? Inside the windy halls of a mage's lair who lives on a mountainside and wields elemental magic, that might not be the right tone for making an ooze seem formidable. But alternatively, in the disease-infested sewers of a plague doctor's lair, an ooze could be used to heighten the sense of sickening griminess. Perhaps an urban ooze, composed of disgusting sewerage and alchemical refuse, could lurch up and ambush the party as they enter the plague doctor's abode. Or, when the party are inside the lair, something thick like honey drizzles down from the ceiling onto one of their shoulders or into their hair. When the characters look up, something indescribable falls and engulfs them. The first impression of a monster goes a long way to making them seem formidable. Oozes should never just be found kind of casually sliding down a dungeon's corridor, minding their own business. Have them hiding in dark crevices, slithering out of corners, or bubbling up from grates. A character could be investigating a wall with arcane runes inscribed upon it. They lean in close to read the runes more carefully, and then suddenly something foams and gurgles from between the brickwork. Peering into a hag's cauldron could cause the half-dissolved remains of her victims to suddenly lurch out, melted together, crying out horribly in a slurry of flesh-colored ooze. Be intentional with your choice of when an ooze elevates the atmosphere of your campaign, and then it's simply a matter of choosing which ooze to use. There's comparatively fewer oozes to choose from than other monster types, but what's there isn't a bad selection depending on your needs. Let's talk about the gelatinous cube first. I admittedly never thought I would use a gelatinous cube in my D&D campaign ever, but then I got a really good idea. A common weakness of the gelatinous cube is that player characters can simply step out of the way of it. So put something inside the cube that the players want so that they have to confront it. Gelatinous cubes might be an alchemical created security system for guarding treasures. The party enters a large room, possibly a vault that they've just broken into. In the center of the room, an artifact is suspended as if it's being magically displayed. The fool who reaches for the artifact without further investigation is engulfed into the gelatinous cube. Pink mist spreads through the cube as its victim starts to be dissolved. The oblex is also becoming one of D&D's most infamous horror-themed oozes, since it was first conceived by Nolan Whale in the pages of Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. The oblex is perfect for an invasion of the Body Snatchers style horror mystery. The oblex is one of the few oozes that can really work as a central villain for a story arc. In addition to the oblex being able to impersonate its devoured victims by extruding slimy simulacrums, its Eat Memories attack can be similarly horrific. What does it feel like to have your memories drained by an oblex? There is, of course, the negative D4, D6, D8 debuff that a character suffers on attack rolls and ability checks, but how do you describe what a character is experiencing from this effect in the story of your game? Is their mind clouded, or do their thoughts slip from their grasp like slime? The other great thing about the oblex is that there are several stat block variants, making it possible to fill an entire village or region with impersonating oblexes. I do also really like the stat block for the Dragon Blood Ooze, which I think is in Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. To be honest, I probably wouldn't present it as trying to take the shape of a dragon necessarily, or even have it related to dragons at all, but I like that its pseudopod attack automatically grapples, making the ooze feel sticky and unpleasant to fight, like you want to get away from it. And its slime breath is just amazing as a monster ability. Again, I wouldn't describe the slime breath as a breath weapon necessarily, but rather this ooze bubbles up and suddenly projects slimy strands of itself in a disgusting net of melted mozzarella. The best part is that anyone who fails their save against this breath weapon is pulled towards the ooze, as if it vomits forth its tendrils and reels its victims in to be devoured. That will very likely catch your players by surprise. From the Grim Hollow Monster Grimoire, I love the Mage Bane Ooze. It can corrode and destroy magic weapons and armor and eat spells cast on it to heal itself. It's also likely to catch your players unprepared and probably frightful of its effects as their valued treasures are reduced to mundane bits of scrap. The Blood Ooze is a higher CR ooze that could be conjured by a vampire or a lich to assist in a violent battle. The corpses of the lich's lair dry out as their blood coalesces into a single entity. Or perhaps a Blood Ooze is all that's left of a vampire defeated by eldritch power. The Blood Ooze's attack also has an auto grapple and restrain, and an engulf ability that allows you to emphasize that feeling of claustrophobia and being suffocated inside of an ooze. If a vampire's crypt is indeed what you have in mind for your party's next adventure, you should first check out this video on how to make vampires formidable encounters. Or if you're introducing more eldritch horror into your campaign, watch this video about making mind flayers formidable to use them to their full potential. If you want to run D&D in a dark fantasy world, join our campaign by subscribing to the channel.